Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today is kind of like a story time. I'm going to be talking about my Cavernoma story. For those of you that don't know what a cavernoma is, it is basically a clump of blood vessels that looks like a raspberry, and I had one of those in my brain, so I had to get that removed recently in April, the beginning of April, and so I'm going to talk about that experience and the surgery and everything. So this all started in January 2019, but actually before that I was complaining of numbness on the side of my face that it was on, so that was the right side, or no, the left side. I had numbness on the left side of my face, and also I felt weak, so I felt like my head was weak, and because of that I went to the emergency room and I wasn't given, they didn't do an MRI of my brain. They actually just gave me medication and told me that everything looked fine. But later on I got an MRI and I had a neurologist who took a look at that, and she said that I had a benign tumor, and she said it wasn't anything to worry about because it's normal. You know, people can get those and it doesn't cause any problems. It can only cause problems if it gets bigger. So a year later, March 13th, 2020, I was in London because I go to the university there, and I was just walking in the park with my friends when all of a sudden I lost my ability to speak properly. So I was speaking gibberish, and I initially thought it was a stroke. So of course I freaked out, and my friends and I went to the hospital right away, and I waited in the ER, or the A&E as it's called there, and I was given some paracetamol while I waited, and through this waiting time my speech actually got better. I still had a bit of trouble, but it was slowly getting better. Once they got me inside, they did a CT scan. They told me that I have a tumor that the CT scan showed, but they couldn't really see it because it was behind blood. Once they told me that, I contacted my mom, and I thought maybe it could potentially be something to do with the benign tumor that was talked about with my neurologist the year previously, and it turned out that it was the same spot, it was the same tumor. And what I had found out throughout my time in the hospital was that it had grown and bled, so that was the cause of me losing my speech. It was located in the speech part of my brain. After doing another MRI there, I was told it. So, and then they were telling me that I had to stay in the hospital, and they were going to contact the other hospital nearby to come by and take a look as well, and give me what I can do or my options for treatment and medication. So yeah, I had that MRI the day after, so I spent the night in the hospital, and then once I got that information that we were waiting for the other hospital to come, I spent the night, a few more days there. And after a few days of being there and still being on hold with the other hospitals and to get looked at, I was told that I could go home and that they would give me a call once I can come back in, and they said it could take up to 5 days. So I waited 5 days, and on the 5th day they called me and told me that it would take about another week, and everything was pushed back because of COVID, and so that was more important at the time. That's why, yeah, everything was pushed back. Throughout this time as well, my mom was trying to get me home, to just get back home because of COVID, and also since we weren't really getting any answers from the hospital there, that maybe I could get treated at home. I also emailed the hospital to see if I could get the MRI, so then my neurosurgeon here in California could go from there with that information of the MRI. And I wasn't able to get the full MRI, I was only able to get the report. I flew back home and I had to start the process all over again. So I got another MRI and got in contact with a neurosurgeon, and I should mention that by this point I felt pretty much completely normal and was just waiting for things that I could do, more, answers. So then on April 6th, 2020. We had a Zoom call appointment with the neurosurgeon, and it was my first time meeting him on that call. And the neurosurgeon did confirm that it was a cavernoma, and he told me what we would be able to do from there. That was pretty much the extent of the appointment. So it seems like, from what we got from the neurosurgeon, it seemed like surgery was pretty much one of the only options, or I'd just have to watch it for the rest of my life. However, that night actually it happened again. I lost my ability to speak, and so I told my mom, and we rushed to the emergency room, and another scan of my brain was taken there. And I also met the neurosurgeon that I talked to that day in person, and I was introduced to another neurosurgeon who would be doing my surgery the next morning. And at the hospital, the neurosurgeons told me that after looking at the MRI and everything, it looked like there were like little seizures, and that was probably that was the cause of my loss of speech as well. It was all due to that cavernoma. So at that point they said that they did have to do surgery. So that's what I did the next morning. And after the 3-hour surgery the next morning, I was taken to the ICU, and I spent the night in intensive care. The next morning, I was taken back to the room I was in before, so I was cleared to go home that night, and I just had to wait for another MRI to see what it looked like after the surgery, as well as a speech therapist was going to come in and make sure that everything looked fine with my speech, and that I could walk around and things like that, that my brain wasn't impacted. So everything looked good, and I went home around 6 p.m. that day. Overall, I'm glad that the surgery didn't require them to shave as much of my like a lot of hair off. Like you could never tell pretty much that I had surgery there. When I went home, I was prescribed the same medication I was given at the hospital, anti-seizure medication and anti-nausea medication. And for a few days after the surgery, I did feel a bit nauseous, and I couldn't really eat much. And so I took those for about a week, and my speech is definitely a lot better than it, obviously than it was in those moments. And I'm glad that it didn't have a long-term effect. Because I'm still recovering, I still sometimes like mess up on my words or get the wrong words out of my mouth, or it's like hard to do that. But I'm just glad that it's not something that has impacted me, and I've lost my ability to speak forever. In terms of recovery, there were days when I felt like I was going through that again. I felt like the same kind of feeling that I had like right before those seizures happened, but that was just part of the recovery. And there were days where it felt worse than others, so it felt like an immediate emergency, and I felt like I would lose my speech again at any moment. So of course I was scared about that, and it slowly got better. Yeah, sometimes I do get lightheaded, and I'm still kind of recovering, so I still kind of feel that way, just not as bad as it used to be. And there would be days where those feelings would be heightened. About a month after the surgery, I went to that neurosurgeon's office to get staples taken out of my head, and to also look at the MRIs and just talk about how I'm recovering and all of that. Right now everything seems to be going on track for recovery, and feeling a lot better about the whole situation. Like as I mentioned, I felt scared throughout recovery, but I think I'm pretty much, I'm glad to be getting back to normal. I'm just glad that it's not gonna affect me for the rest of my life. And related to my last video about Turner syndrome, if you're wondering, this is not Turner's related. This is just something that I went through and wanted to share on this channel. So yeah, thank you for listening to my story, and I will leave my social medias in the description below. And if you have any questions, let me know. You can put it in the comments. And yeah, thank you. Have a good day.